In today's video, we will be taking an in-depth look into the Lion Sin of Pride Escanor's kit in order to figure out if he's truly worthy of being called the One. Escanor starts off strong by having the highest damage stat in the game at 78,884 damage, which goes well together with his second and third passive. Now, at this point, I'm assuming most people know what his passives do, but if you don't, I'll give a quick rundown. Escanor has access to hour stacks, and what these hour stacks do is they increase his damage by 15% and his range by 1.5%. He will gain one of these hour stacks after every wave, and it will cap out at 12. And then after he gets to 12, every wave after that, he will go down, or he will lose 1. Now, the other part of Escanor's kit you should know about is his first passive, which allows you to burn unit slots. And what each unit slot you burn will give him a permanent 1 hour stack. And if you decide to burn all your unit slots except for your Escanor, you will gain not only 5 permanent hour stacks on Escanor, but Escanor becomes free to place, and he will auto upgrade himself once per wave, regardless of how much money you have. And finally, he has a third passive, and this passive gives him 30% burn, as well as making it so that every single time he applies burn on an enemy, he cleanses himself of all status effects and debuffs. And the last part of his third passive is that whenever an enemy leaves his range, they will take 100% burn damage from Escanor. Now, the crucial thing to know about Escanor obviously is going to be whether or not you decide to run him on a team or use him solo, because if you run him on a team, you will likely have 0 hour stacks on placement. However, if you decide to run him by himself, you will have 5 hour stacks. This means that the minimum amount of damage for each Escanor will be very, very different. This will also mean that you get to 12 hour stacks a lot faster if you run him solo. So we know at 0 hour stacks, Escanor will be doing 78,884 damage, while at 5 hour stacks, you will be doing 138,047 damage. This is almost 2 times the other Escanor's damage. However, the important thing to know here is that despite this, once they both reach 12 hour stacks, they will both still be doing the same amount of damage. At 12 hour stacks, they will do 244,540 damage and 73,362 burn damage for a total DPS of 41,245. Now, Escanor has access to an ability called Ultimate, which permanently sets him to 12 hour stacks for 5 waves. However, he will be sold after 5 waves. On top of this, he gets a damage increase from Ultimate, which increases his total damage to 283,982 damage and 85,149 burn damage for a total DPS of 47,898. Now, this is his Traitless stats, and this is one we consider him by himself. Now, while it may seem better to run Escanor by himself, running him on a team allows him to get access to buff units, and the crucial unit he gets access to is Hibana. For those of you who don't know what Hibana does, a quick little summary is essentially Hibana will place a tree on the track. This tree has 20% of Hibana's max range, and what the tree does is it reapplies any burn that is applied within the tree's range, essentially like doubling the total burn damage. And on top of this, enemies will also be inflicted with the Scorch debuff, and what this does is it allows fire ally units to do 20% more damage to that enemy, and Scorch lasts for 60 seconds. And because of this, she can increase Escanor's damage output up to 5 times. Now, let's take a look at Escanor's damage combined with Hibana. When you have 3 Hibanas down and you're at 0 hour stacks, Escanor will be doing 94,660 damage and 94,660 burn damage. Now, you will notice here with 3 Hibanas down, the burn damage and damage will be equal to each other. At 5 hour stacks, he will do 165,655 damage and burn damage. At 12 hour stacks, he will do 293,480 burn damage and damage. And then once you activate Ultimate, this goes up to 340,776 damage and burn damage, which equates to a final DPS of 90,873. So right off the bat, you can see that his DPS practically doubles just by bringing 1 unit. And the important thing to note about this unit is that you just need to place her, you don't even need to upgrade her. Now, you can have down a total of 12 Hibanas because Hibana has a max placement of 3, And obviously, if you have 4 people, everyone can bring her. So I will be showing you the stats for what it looks like with 12 Hibanas. However, if you want to see what the stats look like with 6 Hibanas and 9 Hibanas, that can be found in the spreadsheet that I will have in the description of the video. So, at 0 hour stacks and 12 Ibanas, he'll do 94,660 damage and 307,647 burn damage. At 5 hour stacks, he does 165,655 damage and 538,383 burn damage. At 12 hour stacks, he does 293,448 damage and 953,706 burn damage for a total DPS of 170,688. And this will increase all the way up to 198,218 when you activate ultimate. So here you can see this is pretty much 5 times his original damage when you have him down by himself, which, as you guys remember me saying, that was Hibana, you can increase his damage up to 5 times. However, you do need 4 people, so it might be a little difficult, but remember, even when you only bring Hibana, you can double his damage output, essentially. Now let's take a look at his Monarch stats. At 0 stacks, he will do 315,536 damage and 94,660 burn damage. At 5 stacks, this will go up to 552,188 damage and 165,656 burn damage. At 12 stacks, he does 978,162 damage and 293,446 burn damage, with a total DPS of 181,938. And when you activate ultimate, this will increase all the way up to 211,282 damage per second. Now, when we add Hibana to the mix, we will see he does 378,643 damage and 378,643 burn damage. Just like the Traitless stats, with 3 Hibanas, the burn damage and damage will be equal. So at 5 stacks, he will do 662,623 damage and burn damage. At 12 hour stacks, this will increase to 1,173,794 damage and burn damage, for a final DPS of 344,312. And this will go all the way up to 399,847 when you have ultimate activated as well. So once again, you can see his DPS pretty much doubles just by having 3 Hibanas down. Now, once again, the stats for 6 and 9 Hibanas will be found in the spreadsheet down below. However, I will skip straight to 12 Hibanas. With 12 Hibanas, he will do 378,643 damage and 1,230,590 burn damage at 0 hour stacks. At 5 hour stacks, he does 2,153,530 burn damage and 662,625 damage. At 12 hour stacks, he does 1,173,794 damage and 3,814,831 burn damage for a total DPS of 749,271, which goes all the way up to 870,122 damage when ultimate is activated. Now, I hope this does a pretty good job of displaying the damage potential behind Escanor, both when using a team and when you decide to use him solo. But I think, personally anyway, I think he's deserving of his title of the one, at least for now, since there is no other unit that can really equal his DPS, especially when you consider the fact that you can pair him together with not only Hibana, but other damage buffers such as Haruka, Elstafo, and Subaru. But I will be honest, this isn't super easy to replicate because of how Hibana works, because you need to hit the enemy when they're in the Hibana's tree's range for it to actually reapply. So with that in mind, I recommend going for Marksman or Deadeye for crit damage, because whenever Hibana reapplies burn, that burn damage, even though it was reapplying Escanor's burn damage, counts as her burn. So if you have Deadeye, you have a chance to obviously do crit with her. But that's all for today's video. I'm trying out, a new style, if you guys can tell. But let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.